And if we think about our subconscious as like a storehouse of everything that's ever made an impact on you, that's a lot of shit that doesn't actually serve you anymore. If our conditioning came from our family of origin or our childhood home or the way that our teen years unfolded, and that everything or everyone that's ever made an impact on me has imparted something into my subconscious storehouse, then I imagine it to be like an episode of Hoarders, floor to ceiling. And if I really was able to get in there and have a good bond clean and clear out the stuff that's outdated and doesn't serve me, then I would be in a better position to navigate everything in my life from a place of accountability, from an awareness that I get to choose my response and that I can choose my mindset. And in doing so, I can facilitate an incredibly rewarding version of my life experience in spite of my challenges, in spite of my grief, my loss, my trauma, because there's elements of my life that I cannot control and would never have chosen, but that will not define the rest of my story. Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Eslana Lower and this is the Why Mindset Matters podcast. I am an author, speaker and resilience mindset coach. I'm also a nurse and a midwife, and for years I have taught a workshop that I called Why Mindset Matters in Childbearing, and essentially used the superpower that was this approach to life and childbearing in the context of pregnancy and preparation for labour and birth to be able to prepare people to navigate that journey in a way that saw them not only be empowered to do so, but avoid unnecessary birth trauma. It was about not giving your power away, really owning your journey, taking accountability and responsibility for doing that, and for acknowledging that the difference between where I am and where it is I want or need to be in order to facilitate a really rewarding experience, a major life event being the birth of my baby, is just a matter of filling the gaps. Whether it's knowledge, information, resources, connection, support, there's usually one or more of a series of these things that are missing in order to create the bridge between where I am and where it is I want or need to be in order to have the kind of life event or experience that I desire. And so my workshops helped facilitate that. The beauty of the Why Mindset Matters in Childbearing workshop is that it's an approach to life, education, information, and life skills that are incredibly valuable across the lifespan. But if we hone them in on labour and birth and childbearing, became really, really powerful, like a torch that helped light the way for people to see that they had within them the capacity to create this incredible life experience, and that by taking ownership and accountability for it, they could not only optimize the chances of birth going the way that they want, and in most cases that was what happened, they even more importantly set themselves up to be able to navigate any potential forks in the road in a way that saw them be empowered and feel capable to continue down this journey in a way that was free from trauma. That the presentation of unforeseen forks in the road or challenges along the way didn't destroy any chance that, happiness, contentment, fulfillment at the other side of this major life event, but rather that they had prepared themselves in a way that ensured that that's how they ended up feeling, regardless of the environmental factors of how their birth needed to play out. Because let's be real, we can't plan birth. We can prepare for it and we can set our intentions for it. And part of what the workshop teaches is about being intentional in our actions and setting our intentions. But even the psychology of how we approach, for instance, birth or life, if I say that this is my birth plan or this was my plan for my life, and then things don't go to plan, we end up feeling, even if it's just subconsciously, this sense of failure. That somehow I or those around me or life has failed me, or I've, failed in my plan for how I wanted my birth to look or feel or play out. And the reality is, when we change our psychology by changing the wording, and I call it a birth intentions, this is my birth intentions form, or these are my intentions for my life, then I have a more fluid approach to how I navigate the journey that will inevitably bring up things throughout whether it's childbearing or our life, things that we didn't maybe see coming, or things that we wouldn't have included in our plan, but are more than capable of navigating. And so I'm so excited to be able to bring this podcast to life, the Why Mindset Matters podcast, because as I said, for many years, I've taught this workshop, Why Mindset Matters in Childbearing, but I always saw there being a Why Mindset Matters series of whatever it was, podcast books, whatever it was, workshops, because I truly believe there isn't any area of your life where your mindset doesn't matter. Your mindset affects everything. And your mindset isn't, I'm not talking about it's just positive thinking or smiling through all the negative shit that happens in your life, or, coaching everything with unrealistic optimism or toxic positivity. I'm talking about being able to navigate your life and the challenges within it in a way that lends itself to you having a rewarding experience of your life, that you're fulfilled by your life experience rather than just purely traumatized by it, And I think it's important to realize that our mindset is the lens through which we will view everything, our challenges, our wins, our successes, our perceived failures or struggles, or it's how we view our pain, our worth, our potential, our possibilities. It's everything. And we are more often than not living out our life from a place of the subconscious, from a place of subconscious conditioning that can go as far back as our childhood. And if we think about our subconscious as like a storehouse of everything that's ever made an impact on you, that's a lot of shit that doesn't actually serve you anymore. I guarantee it doesn't serve you, most of it, because if our conditioning came from our family of origin or our childhood home or the way that our teen years unfolded, and that everything or everyone that's ever made an impact on me has imparted something into my subconscious storehouse, then I imagine it to be like an episode of Hoarders. It's full of a heap of shit that really doesn't serve me, floor to ceiling. And if I really was able to get in there and have a good bond clean and clear out the stuff that's outdated and doesn't serve me, then I would be able to be better positioned to navigate everything in my life from a place of accountability, from an awareness that I get to choose my response. I get to choose the lens through which I view everything, good, bad, or ugly, that happens in my life, and that I can choose my mindset. And in doing so, I can facilitate an incredibly rewarding version of my life experience in spite of my challenges, in spite of my grief, my loss, my trauma, because there's elements of my life that I cannot control and would never have chosen, but that will not define the rest of my story. I know firsthand how possible what I teach is, because life has dealt me no shortage of difficult and challenging cards in life. It started when I was young and it hasn't stopped. And in spite of unimaginable abuse, neglect, trauma, and then significant loss after losing my teenage daughter, I am standing here today as a version of myself that I would describe as the happiest I've ever been and the most fulfilled by my life. And I have been very fortunate. Don't get me wrong, I have rough days, and even this last week has been a particularly difficult one with the grief that continues to permeate my existence. But I am continuing to learn how to live and grieve simultaneously in a way that allows grief to take up space in my heart and soul and continue as it does inevitably on this journey with me, but not become overrun by it and not let it take the wheel of my life or govern or dictate the direction of my life or where I will end up, because I've never been the sum of my origins or was never going to be defined by where I came from in life. And this era of my life is no different. I've been very fortunate enough to be able to internalize the things that I teach and be able to be a living, breathing, walking example of the power of taking responsibility for your mindset and choosing your response in life and choosing how and from what angle you perceive the things that happen around your life, right down to, seeing life as happening for you rather than seeing life as happening to you. Being very careful to not slip into, most of the time we do it unwittingly, but a victim mentality. And so mindset is everything. It is 100% everything, and it underpins everything, your lived experience. If you're currently having an experience where you would describe your life or your existence as less than optimal, if this is not how your ideal life would look. And I'm not talking about environmental factors as far as your ideal life, you'd be living somewhere different or in a different house. I'm talking about the experience of your life that you're having in spite of your environmental factors. Because right now, the capacity that I have to be on the other side of unimaginable trauma but describe myself as the happiest I've ever been is a credit to the fact that we get to choose. We get to look up in life. We get to really slow our roll and take stock of how far I've come and how much the younger version of me would never have believed that I would have these kinds of successes in my life. When I look at, the environmental factors, when I look at the things where I live, the life, the connection, the community that I have in my life, my career choices, my successes, my assets, whatever it is, if I slowed my roll and realized that the younger version of me, these were my goals. But how often do we do it? We set goals and we reach them, but we just keep moving the goalpost faster than we can actually, we don't slow down to appreciate the win. We've already moved the goalpost and made it feel like we're striving for a new thing without actually stopping to recognize how far we've come, how many wins we've made along the way, and how many things that we have overcome or survived that we were so convinced at the time of their unfolding that there was no capacity for us to survive, that there was no way we would make it through this. And yet here we are. And so when we bring in awareness to our mindset being essentially the lens through which we view all of our life, all aspects of our life, and to give weight to this, I want to use an analogy I think I've mentioned before, but if we were all in a room looking at a child cross-legged on the floor and we're all in a circle around that child, you could argue with me that you see the child's face, but I might be positioned in the circle in a way that I see the back of their head. And if we argue and you argue with me that I need to see what you see and the way that you see it, it's not impossible for that to happen, but it is impossible for it to happen from where I'm viewing it and vice versa. But the reality is we get so stuck in our ways and stuck in our subconscious conditioning of how we think things are or are meant to be, or how we have perceived things or other people or behaviors in the past and therefore are on autopilot with how we continue to perceive that, then we can really do ourselves a disservice, because it might have served us to view things that way at one point in our life, but I guarantee that because I'm not the version of me that I was back then, it's very unlikely that viewing things the way I did back then is going to lend itself to the kind of life I would currently describe as rewarding and enriching. And so if I want to view things differently, I have to have the courage to get uncomfortable. I have to be able to get up out of my seat and reposition myself in a different part of the circle to be able to view things differently. And then in doing so, I can realize I actually have the opportunity, if I'm courageous enough, to get up out of my seat in life and reposition myself over and over in many different positions to be able to view the same thing very differently from different angles. And in doing so, open myself up to a greater understanding, not just of myself, of how I perceive things, of others, how they perceive things, but of how life may actually be unfolding. And when we do that, and it really does start with the acknowledgement that I think you're right. I think I'm probably spending most of my life on autopilot. I'm probably doing things on autopilot over and over again in so many areas of my life, but also potentially in ways that maybe don't serve me. And that she's probably right. If I did get a bit uncomfortable and took responsibility for that and started to be a bit more consciously aware of the viewpoint I had a tendency to lean to or was choosing, because it is a choice, it's just happening subconsciously. And the beauty in becoming aware of that is when we are aware that something is a choice, we become aware of our capacity to make that choice more consciously. And so I can start to become aware that maybe I maybe I have been taking on the victim role and I didn't mean to, and it wasn't my intention and it's not my preference. But one way of seeing that is if you have villains in your life at the moment, and if you have people that your narrative internally, externally, when you talk to other people or about certain people, if they're the villain in your story, and most of the time we have at least one, then if I become aware that in order to villainize that person, I have to put myself beneath them. And there's no villain without a victim. So if they are the villain in my story, then that makes me the victim, and I've chosen to put myself beneath them. So if I want to take my power back that I didn't know I'd packaged up with a beautiful bow and handed to this person, even if it was not like consciously going up to them and giving it, but by spending any energy on this narrative of how they're the villain, I can take my power back. I can stop villainizing them in order to stop being the victim, allow them to be on their journey, because I don't need to control the actions. It's a futile effort to try and control the actions of anybody outside of yourself. Let them be them, but let me actually choose the way that I'm going to respond to their behaviors and take accountability for it. Because without realizing it, if I've made someone a villain, I preemptively decided how I think a lot of their behaviors are going to unfold, or their attitudes or their beliefs. And this is all stuff we can't really fully understand on the part of somebody else. You can try when somebody's intimately involved in your life, you can communicate effectively to try and unpack and understand each other's viewpoints and beliefs and values and things like that. But we float through life using our creative imagination to imagine what we think the other person's intentions or motives or beliefs or values are. And then we, based on the decisions we've made about that person, allow our behavior to become a part of the interactions with them. So if I believe that you're being a villain, if I believe that you've got malicious intent, or that your intention is to sabotage or harm me or whatever, then I'm going to come at any interaction that has anything to do with you from a defensive place that probably doesn't serve. If I define my ideal life as I want peace and I want connection and I want loving, peaceful, respectful relationships, but I'm coming to interactions from a place of fight or flight, ready for war, because I've decided that you're the villain and that makes me the victim. So I'm going to act like the victim without even realizing it. You can see how I'm giving my power away. Instead, if I bring it back to an awareness that I get to choose. I get to choose the way that I perceive this. And if I go, you know what, maybe I will never fully understand this person's behavior, but that sits with them. If it really bothers me and I need to understand it, and this person matters enough in my life for me to want to seek understanding, then I have an opportunity to communicate effectively in an endeavor to seek understanding. If this person isn't worth that, then let it go and focus on, because if my desire is for peace and respectful relationships, and the track record or the investment says that isn't going to happen over here, I'm going to let you step aside and I'm going to focus on creating a peaceful life. And that starts with being peaceful. So our mindset is everything. It underpins everything. It affects everything. As I said, if I want to change my perception, I have to have the courage to get up out of my seat and view things from a different position in that room, say in the analogy, and in doing so be able to see that there's many different ways to look at the same thing, and each angle you look at it from can show it to you in a slightly different way. So of course you're seeing the child's face and I'm seeing the back of their head because that's where we were positioned, and maybe that's where we were conditioned to sit in that circle. But if I want to have a different experience of my life around a certain interaction or experience of my life, then I'm going to need to get a little bit uncomfortable and get up out of my seat. And then either go about trying to find the viewpoint that serves me, or potentially just be curious in experiencing different viewpoints, and in doing so end up finding something that serves me. But either way, it's moving out from under the subconscious conditioning that we perhaps didn't know had affected us, to be able to be more consciously aware that I get to choose. That, where what I'm describing as the seat in that circle, or the perception of our life or the events within it and around it, is essentially our mindset. It's the lens through which we are viewing our life and everything in and around it. And When I realize that I get to choose it, it means that if I'm having an experience of my life that is creating unrest or less than optimal and not the way that I would want it, then perhaps I need to look at the lens through which I'm viewing it and potentially change it. And that's what your mindset is. It's everything. Like I said, what mindset isn't is toxic positivity. I'm not talking about this rubbish of saying, and I know it's never said with malicious intent. I don't believe people say everything happens for a reason because they're trying to be malicious or hurtful or disrespectful. I think that it's the endeavor of the human spirit to find meaning in everything in this crazy, chaotic roller coaster we call life. And I think that although it comes from a well-intentioned place, it can become toxic positivity. When you say to somebody who is navigating the most unimaginable life events and is finding themselves in the rubble of a life they no longer even recognize and unsure how they're going to continue in this life, everything happens for a reason. It can feel like a kick in the guts. And so I'm not talking about, doing that. I'm not talking about trying to make out like everything can be completely positive and that we should be finding the positive in everything. Some parts of life just suck. And sometimes they suck for longer than you want them to. But it's working out, does it have to keep being something that sucks? Do I have the potential to maybe take a bit more responsibility for my mindset and the way that I'm viewing this? And it's not about finding some way of sugarcoating it or saying that everything happens for a reason. It's about being able to potentially learn how to live and grieve simultaneously. It's about working out, am I getting stuck in the events that have happened in and around my life? And I need to work out a way to get myself out of that mud that I've got stuck in so that I can regain my momentum and keep moving forward in spite of my struggles, and in a way that lends itself to joy and passion and adventure, even in the absence of sadness and grief or a history of trauma. And that like I said, our origins don't need to define us, and we don't need to be completely broken or destroyed by the inevitable challenges of life. There are some things that we can do that help avoid being destroyed by the parts of life that hurt the most. And one of the ways that we take accountability for, and I guess control of our mindset, is to realize that I'm not responsible for every thought that pops into my mind, but I am responsible for what I do with them. So this month we had what should have been my daughter's 18th birthday. So obviously I had no shortage of thoughts popping into my mind that were uninvited. Sad thoughts about things that I will have to miss out on life because of her absence, things and milestones and events that I will have to navigate without her. And so obviously as these thoughts permeate my mind that I didn't choose and I'm not responsible for, I have a choice. And I am responsible for what I do with those thoughts. So using this as an example, if I feed and water thoughts of sadness and then listen to sad songs on repeat, I am going to create the internal environment that facilitates a release of hormones that make me feel the way I'm thinking. It's not chicken and the egg shit. It's not which one came first. I think I felt sad and then I was thinking sad thoughts. No, it's not. The thing that comes first is an uninvited thought, but then there is what you do with it. And unfortunately, because we live out most of our life from a place of the subconscious, we do stuff with our thoughts without realizing that we're doing it, without being accountable for it. And then we find ourselves feeling the result and the hormone that results from what we did with the thoughts. And so we get confused because it all happens so quickly. We think, I was just feeling really sad. But if I reverse engineer what happened in that part of my day, I wasn't just suddenly feeling sad. Like, okay, yep, I was, if I was listening to sad songs on repeat, if I was feeding and watering these thoughts, of course my body released the hormones to correlate with that. And because we find what we look for. Energy goes where our focus is. So if I focus on all the things that I'm going without because I'm living without her, if I focus on all the things that are justifiably sad, and I'm not talking about ignoring or disregarding grief or sadness, Grief is a bitch. It permeates your day and your soul and your existence without warning. I want to say it visits without warning, but it never leaves. It just takes up residence in your soul. And if you do it well, then it can take up residence in a part of your soul that means it's not at the wheel of your life. But either way, it never goes away. And so it's a bitch. It will just remind you of its presence without warning, and you're suddenly in the thick of it. And I'm not talking about disregarding that. I'm talking about bringing enough of an emotionally intelligent awareness to, okay, the grief is heavy today. What can I do about this? Am I going to sit with this too long and feel, really feel the result of the thoughts that I feed and water? Or am I going to acknowledge it, bring self-care and compassion to my existence and to my day, and maybe expect a little bit less from myself, but also really choose my response to its permeating presence? Because if I look for the positive, and I've talked about it with gratitude and how we can use gratitude as a means of creating the release of feel-good hormones, because that's a string that once you pull that string, you can't find the end of it. I challenge you to take up the string of gratitude and find the point at which you're done and there's nothing more to be grateful for. So you start feeding and watering thoughts of gratitude, you're going to release feel-good hormones, and your body is going to be rewarded as a result. So if there's a take-home message, it's that you're not responsible for every thought that pops into your mind, but you are 100% responsible for what you do with it. So if you find yourself in an internal environment or existence where your body is fueled by fight or flight or sadness or depressive symptoms, then it might be worth reverse engineering the things that I am feeding, watering, or facilitating that would be responsible for enhancing the release of these hormones. And again, I'm not talking about the people who are clinically depressed and need pharmaceutical help. I'm talking about being aware that once a thought pops into my mind, I have to choose. I have to choose what to do with that thought. It's just whether I'm making those choices from a place of subconscious and habit and conditioning and tendency. And people might say, oh, but you don't understand. Like, that's just me. I've always been that way. I can't think differently. I can't do things differently. Or that's just him. He's always been that way. The confines of this podcast don't facilitate me doing a deep dive into neuroplasticity, but if you don't know what it is, I would encourage you to do your own deep dive and your own research and really unpack what neuroplasticity is. But I'm here to tell you that the good news is that you 100% can change. Anyone can. With education and information, we are able to rewire our brain and create new neural pathways that absolutely mean that if you're one of these people that goes, no, you don't understand, and I'm this age and I've always been this way and I've always done it this way, with neuroplasticity and practice, you can rewire your brain in a way that facilitates it being a subconscious resource, like a bond clean of your subconscious that clears out all that shit that doesn't serve you and creates new habitual ways of relating to life. That means that we break those habits, that we do realize that we're accountable for what we do with our thoughts. And so I'm going to take accountability. I'm going to make a conscious choice about this, and that I am going to get out of bed. I'm not going to stay in bed and listen to sad songs. I'm going to go for a walk on the beach. And if my actions and behavior and environment don't help facilitate pulling me out of this little bit of a darker place, because I'm in the thick of it personally with grief right now, then I'm going to put myself around people who facilitate the kind of connection where my grief and sadness doesn't need the silence filled with words. It can just be the acknowledgement that, you know what? No, today I'm not okay. And that is okay. And we say that. Culturally, we're trying to adopt this. It's okay to not be okay. But I think that we could do better. And we could do better for ourselves. Fortunately, in my grief, I have been able to facilitate a sense of community and connection with people who do understand that some days I'm just not okay, and that it is okay. And that those days they see that, I don't even need to say anything. It's a shift in my energy. I'm not as smiley, I'm not as bubbly, and it invites a very welcomed and very much needed hug where it lingers and they're aware that the silence doesn't need to be filled or accommodated by unnecessary words, that their presence is enough, and that I just need to maybe sit with my sadness a bit. But I'm not feeding and watering sadness in a way that releases hormones that facilitate feeling depressed and living an experience of depression. And there's a difference. And I'm not saying it's okay to not be okay, as in we're just disregarding when people truly, truly aren't, because we say it's okay to not be okay and that we should be speaking up about that aspect of our mental health and well-being. But I think the problem is that when you do, a lot of people see that as like a weakness or a vulnerability that needs addressing. Like, have you thought about this? Have you seen a counsellor? Have you done this, that, or the other? The courage it takes to speak up and say, I'm not okay, is massive. It's not weakness at all. And there's a big difference between going, today I'm just not okay, and me saying, I'm really not okay and I need some help, you know? And so I think that we could do better for ourselves and each other in acknowledging, today's a rough one, I'm not okay, what am I going to do about it? I'm going to be very careful with what thoughts I feed and water, what choices that I make with regards to the internal dialogue that I allow and the external dialogue that I allow, the external efforts and activities that I don't expect too much from myself, but that I also don't facilitate feelings of depression by staying in bed and self-isolating in a toxic way. And so you can start to see how when we move from a place of acting, behaving and reacting from the subconscious that is potentially outdated and doesn't serve us, and more into this place of conscious living, of being intentional in our actions, our behaviors, our words, and more careful of who, how, and where we give our energy to. Because your energy is your power. Have you ever been in the shop and you stare at someone across the shop that's a long way away and they'll turn directly and look at you? It's because energy goes where our focus is, but also we are so much energy. We are so powerful that where we put our energy, we manifest more of it. It's why if you decide to buy a Mercedes, you start seeing them everywhere. Your brain will find evidence for what it is you look for. So obviously if it's a car, that's easy to see, but if you tend to have a pessimistic approach to life, your brain will go on a fact-finding mission, your subconscious will as well, to validate that perception of your life. And you'll find no shortage of things that are negative. Shitty people, shitty job, shitty car, shitty everything. You'll find no shortage of validation, whatever it is you look for. But similarly, if you have an optimistic view, and I'm not talking about toxic positivity, I'm talking about you choose to view your life as happening for you. You choose to view your life as a contractual agreement you make, your soul makes with life and the universe, that I get to live, love, have passion and adventure, but the flip side of the coin is that I will experience loss, because you can't love something or someone with such intensity that you can live out the rest of your days in the absence of that thing or that person unscathed. It's the sweet versus sour. It's, the contractual agreement that we have is that we will face challenges in life, and we want so badly to be unconditionally loved. We want to find our soulmate and have this one person who's going to love me unconditionally, but the reality is no one can do that. The only person who can do that for you is you. And so when we go about life with these unrealistic expectations and we set ourselves up for disappointments, and there will be inevitable what we perceive as failures, then life will present challenges. It will present grief. It will present trauma in different forms, and things that we will have to navigate and either learn to live with or get through. And some things you never come through the other side of, like grief. It stays with you, and you either get stuck in it and your growth is stunted by it, or you learn how to grow around it, carry it with you across the lifespan, and in doing so, live and grieve simultaneously, which is 100% possible. But we will inevitably have challenges in our life. How we view those challenges, how we view what happens in and around our life will ultimately be the determinant of our life experience and how we perceive it. The level of joy and satisfaction, contentment and happiness we have will be in direct relation to our mindset and our perception of what happens in and around our life, not the environmental factors of what happens in and around our life. And that's why you can find people who have been through the most horrific things, or like myself, the most horrific trauma and loss. And yet on the other side of that can define myself as the happiest I've ever been. But then you can also find people who can have seemingly minor inconveniences in their life or throughout their life, and let that define the edges of their life as being this container within which they experience unrest and discontentment. So it's very much not what happens to you. I'm here to tell you that while I hope with every fiber of my being that you never have to navigate challenges like what I've been through in the last couple of years, or really any part of my life, I hope that you don't face those challenges. I am confident in your capacity to be able to navigate anything, and definitely exceed your own expectations for the degree and level of strength and courage and vulnerability that you have to be able to come through any of your challenges in a way where you can stand on the other side of them so fucking proud of yourself and so aware that you are capable of facing anything in life with the right supports, the right, community and connection around you, and the right mindset. You 100% can endure anything that life throws at you in a way where you describe yourself on the other side of that thing as happier than you've ever been. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that, man, my life journey has been anything but easy, and the last 2.5 years have been the most unimaginable and horrific times of my life. But I have had so much beauty, so much love, and so much connection come out of it. The kind of positives and connection and love that I'm talking about that's come out of the darkest days that I've had have been the things and the people that have held my head above water when I was convinced that I would drown. And a lot of the times, people that had no idea the significance of the impact that they were making on me by providing connection. Our basic human need at our core is for connection. And when we have that need met, we start to realize the capacity and capability we have to survive. And in doing so, and the better we get at surviving, the better we get at realizing, oh my God, maybe I can do better than survive. Maybe I actually can thrive in the aftermath of this. But that connection and simple acts of kindness, my God, those things go so far in saving people's lives and making impacts on people that we may never fully understand the gravity of how much we've done for someone when we show up authentically in life and really, put our best foot forward and choose kindness, and it saves lives. I 100% vouch for that because I know it has saved mine. So it felt like a ramble. I hope it sounded better than a ramble, but that is essentially what underpins the concept of this podcast, being why mindset matters. Like I said, and I will say again, there's no area of your life where your mindset doesn't matter, and it is something that we get to choose. Obviously, if you're having an experience of your life that is less than optimal and not the way you would want it, if you got to really break it down and define how you wanted your life to look and feel, then the beauty is we can start to reverse engineer how we are having that experience and break it down and the parts of it that we can impact and control, which is a lot more than we give credit to. Then we can start to alter our approach to those controllable factors, and in doing so, start to have a very different experience of the same version of our life. And it's incredibly powerful. So I'm very excited to be able to share this podcast with you. It's been something that I've carried with me for probably the last 10 years, is the desire to bring this to life, not necessarily aware that it was going to take the form of a podcast, but I'm writing a book at the moment. I've also been fortunate enough to have the opportunity to co-author a book with a beautiful gentleman from the UK. And the book series is called Start Over, Turn Any Loss into a Sensational Comeback. And I will be in book 1 of volume 2, which will go to print in March next year. So I'm very excited. There's a lot happening. I am working on some extra workshops that I'll be delivering as well. In the meantime, you can follow me on Instagram at Resilience Mindset Coach. My name is Eslana Loa. I'm grateful for the opportunity to share this podcast with you and that you have listened. I look forward to sharing the upcoming episodes with you. So stay tuned to Why Mindset Matters.